Okay, cool. We are live and recording. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. Um, yeah, I'm having a really good day. I've been having a really good few weeks, honestly. I've been just really excited about all of our clients lately and just how close I've been getting to a lot of them, and just seeing them grow in so many ways. Not only in the fat loss that some of them are achieving, depending on what their goal is, or some of the people, I have a few clients where we're working on building muscle and increasing calories, stepping out of their comfort zone there. Some clients who, were always doing home workouts, we started transitioning them to having some actual workouts in the gym, which can be a little uncomfortable if you're not used to that. So really proud of those clients who are taking that leap there too. We had Shannon, who just completed a half marathon this past weekend. Megan also completed a half marathon this past weekend. So many clients progressing in the gym, in their lifts, and just overall having so many mindset wins around food too. So just a lot of really good positive vibes, positive stuff going on with our clients. And then also really excited about all the women who have been taking the leap and joining our team and joining our program over the past few weeks too. Just really grateful for the amount of support and interest in my program, our program, and really excited that so many of you have put your trust in me to help guide you there. And I'm really excited to see some of these transformations that are going to happen from some of these people who are just getting started and seeing what they're going to, not only look like, but also feel like, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, even a month from now, they're going to start seeing some changes in the way they think about food, the way they feel about food, the way they feel in their body. And it's just so exciting. So, overall, like what I do, I ultimately just want to make a really positive impact, and I see that really coming into fruition. I've seen it really a lot over these past few weeks, but especially these past few months, and I can't be more grateful for to be able to do what I do. So just want to start off with that, and now we can go ahead and dive into today's topic, because this is going to be a good one, and I guarantee. Actually, I can almost guarantee that what we're going to talk about today is something that you probably have not heard about. So you'll see the title of this video, of this live, of this podcast is why you should not and cannot try to exercise your way into fat loss. And I'm sure you've heard some kind of variation of this saying a little bit, but what I'm going to talk about is going to be completely different actually than what you've probably heard about before. So when you hear that, you probably think of that, old phrase that you've heard time and time again about, quote unquote, you can't outwork a bad diet, which is, very true to a large extent. But the reason why that kind of phrase has come about is just because of the caloric value of foods and how long it takes to actually burn a significant amount of calories. Like you can go for a few mile run and you might burn, a few hundred calories there, and it might take you, 30 minutes or maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on how quick you do it. But it might take you roughly 30 minutes on average to do that. And it might take you a matter of 30 seconds to eat 300 calories. Like if you have a bunch of candy right in front of you, it might take you 30 seconds to eat up the rest of those calories. And same thing goes for all the exercise you do. When it comes to lifting, you really don't burn a ton of calories during your lifting sessions. So it's very easy to eat back those calories very quickly. So that's where that whole phrase of you can't outwork a bad diet comes from, is from the idea that, okay, it takes 30 minutes, an hour and a half to get a decent workout in, depending on, what kind of exercise you're doing. But it takes very short period of time to eat back those calories. But what I'm going to talk about today is actually different than this. And this is why I said in the beginning that this is something that you probably have not actually thought about or heard about very much, unless you're like a really big nerd with the nutrition, fitness, fat loss stuff, metabolic adaptation type stuff like I am. So this is different, like I said. So what I'm going to talk about today is what's called the exercise energy compensation model. So big mouthful, right? So when we think about doing exercise. Like let's say if you were to approach fat loss in a way of, okay, I burn this many calories per day on average based off of this calculator. Like let's say I burn 2,000 calories per day. I'm going to do 300 calories extra of exercise that I'm not currently doing. So that way I burn 2,300 calories per day. That's what you would call like the additive model of exercise calories, or the additive model of like how you view your energy expenditure, right? I typically burn this much on average. Like if you were to go into a lab and get tested and it were to say, okay, like Jessica, you burn 300 calories, not 300, you burn 2,000 calories per day just at rest. So if you go and do 300 calories worth of exercise, like let's say if you went into the lab, got on a treadmill, they hooked you up to a bunch of stuff, measured you burning 300 calories during an exercise session, you would think you would burn 2,300 calories on that day, right? Because you're adding in 300 calories worth of exercise. And I say this by you going into a lab and doing it, because our watches, Fitbits, Apple Watches, and things like that, unfortunately, are not that accurate at estimating how many calories we burn. And especially those like treadmills that like tell you how many you're burning, those really aren't that accurate either. But I'd say if you had a way to accurately measure those 30 minutes of exercise, and let's say it said you burn 300 calories during that, mathematically, it would make sense to think, okay, you're burning 2,300 calories in the day. So if you eat 2,000, you're going to be in a 300 calorie deficit and lose weight. But oftentimes, it doesn't work that way. And even if we do 300 extra calories of exercise versus what we're currently doing, we likely won't actually burn 300 extra calories in that day. And that is because of this exercise energy compensation model, which is, like I said, kind of a mouthful. But what this means is that there are different adaptations in the body that happen when we do anything, when we eat less food, when we're stressed, when we're working, when we're not feeling stressed, we're in a good mood, when we are exercising, when we're thinking, when literally everything in the body, there's some kind of reaction or adaptation to it. So this exercise energy compensation model is basically the idea that when you exercise and you purposely, let's say, burn 500, 300 calories extra from additional exercise, there will be some adaptations that take place in the body that make your overall energy expenditure, how many calories you burn for the whole day, go down a little bit compared to what it would be if it just got it tacked onto there. And the reason why the body does this is because ultimately, as humans, as a species, we do not want to die off. We want to survive. We do not want to starve. We don't want to run out of energy. If you run out of energy in your body, like if you were to, lose a bunch of weight consistently for months and months, maybe even years and years, eventually you would starve, literally run out of energy to produce ATP, which is how our body actually is able to do anything. When it comes to energy, even the way our heart beats, it uses ATP to pump blood into our system. Eventually, if we run out of energy, we won't have energy for those basic processes and we would die. We would starve to death, right? So evolutionarily, our body does not want to get to that state where we are super low energy and, we're running out of actual energy, actual ATP for these metabolic processes, for our lungs to breathe, for our heart to beat. We don't want to run out of that. So there are natural adaptations that take place when the body senses that we are lacking some calories or lacking some energy. Or in this case, with exercise, when the body kind of notices that we are doing extra energy and using up energy from exercise, it will start to down-regulate the amount of energy it uses in these other processes. It's almost like if you had a budget, right? And you budgeted out the amount of money that you're able to spend each month based on how much you're earning. And let's say, for whatever reason, maybe, somebody was getting something out of the fridge and they dropped all the eggs on the ground and all the eggs smashed. So you had to go buy new eggs. And let's say eggs are like super expensive, like $100 a dozen, something unrealistic, but let's say they're super expensive. So your grocery budget ends up going through the roof for that month. Or let's say, actually, this is probably a better example. You are on a long weekend trip. You come home from the weekend trip and you realize your refrigerator was broken. It, for some reason, stopped working. So all of your food in there was spoiled, went bad, and you had to buy basically a whole week's worth of refrigerated food at least. Again, so that could be, depending on how much you buy, $100 to $300, depending on, how big your family is and this and that, maybe even more. So let's say your grocery bill ends up being way higher than it typically is. Because of that, you will probably have to find a way to reduce your spending from other things that maybe are less essential. For example, maybe your Starbucks trips that you take multiple times a week, maybe you take them less. Maybe you typically buy a new outfit or something every couple of weeks, and you end up cutting that from your budget. Or maybe you have these different subscriptions and you end up canceling one for the month, or whatever it is. But you'll probably have to compensate for all of those extra expenses you have from the groceries to make up for it. And this is the same kind of concept where, if you're doing a ton of extra exercise, this model or this theory is that your body will then adjust its calorie burn from these other non-essential processes to try to make up for it. So for example, some of these other processes could be things like NEAT. And you have maybe heard me say this before, but this stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically any activity or movement your body does that you aren't really conscious of. So for example, like me talking with my hands, if I'm recording voice messages to clients, I tend to pace around my living room a lot. Maybe it's even subconsciously choosing to park closer or farther away from the door when you go to the store. Maybe it's sitting here, maybe tapping my feet, which you can't really see me doing right now, but I don't typically do it, but I'm doing it to show an example. But all of those things are examples of NEAT that can be slowed down to save energy in the body, and you don't even really realize it. But other things too that are considered non-essential to the body that might slow down if you're doing like a ton of extra exercise are things like your hair. Your hair will potentially grow slower, and that's something that's a lot of people don't even think about. Your nails might grow slower. You might have to cut your nails less. You might have lower sex hormone production. This is why, if women are chronically over-exercising and especially eating a very low-calorie diet on top of that, a lot of times they can see irregular periods or maybe even a complete loss of their period in general. Also, libido will slow down. You'll have less of a sex drive because that's considered, a non-essential process when your body is sensing that there might be like starvation or not enough resources for you to survive. Other things too, another example, which is a really good one, is temperature regulation of your body. So like if you've ever been in a fat loss phase and you've been in one because you've been tracking your food intake, eating less calories, you're probably going to feel colder on an everyday basis versus if you were eating at maintenance calories or maybe even trying to like purposely build muscle, eating a little bit more than what you burn and eating more like higher calories. Like this is something that I notice all the time when I'm in a fat loss phase, in a calorie deficit, especially when I've been in there for a few weeks. I'll notice that I'm just a little bit colder, throughout the day. And I might have to wear like a long sleeve versus a t-shirt if I was in a maintenance phase, which is really interesting, but it's very true. And if you look at like extremes, like bodybuilders who get very, very, very lean, or bikini competitors that get very, very, very lean, they will really notice this. And they might be out in like 70-degree weather, 80-degree weather, but feel like they have to wear a sweatshirt and sweatpants because they're just so cold, because those non-essential processes try to slow down a little bit to make up for that lack of energy. But these same things can occur if you are over-exercising and your body kind of senses there's this huge imbalance of how much you're burning versus how much your body's taking in. So this like adjustment or this compensation can, like I said, vary person to person. Some people are on the low end where they don't have a ton of compensation for all their exercise they're doing. Other people are on the high end. And what I mean by that is compensation as far as how much do these other processes slow down to reduce your calorie burn to make up for the calories you're burning from exercise. So, from the research, it looks like this difference or this compensation is between 10 to 50%. So it's a pretty big range. 10% being the low end, 50% being the high end. And on average, this would come out to around 30%. So what this means is, let's say if you were to go and burn 300 extra calories from exercise, like you would go, like I said, go to a lab, get hooked up, and they would show you, okay, when you actually reached 300 calories burned. If you're on the low end of this, so low compensation, you might burn 10% less than what that number says. So you might burn 30 calories less. So instead of burning 300, you're actually burning 270 extra calories throughout the day. You're still burning 300 calories in that exercise session, but the rest of the day, these other processes slow down a little bit. So you're actually only burning 270 additional calories to what you normally would burn. So on the high end, though, that could be up to 50%, which would mean you might go and do 300 calories worth of exercise. But when you look at the amount of extra calories you're burning at the end of the day from that exercise, it's only 150 calories extra, which if you're trying to calculate how many pounds of fat you're going to lose week to week, you could actually be losing half the amount of fat than what you think because of this huge 50% compensation that you might see. But like I said, on average, it's about 30%. So the average number would be, instead of burning 300 extra calories, even though you're doing 300 calories worth of exercise, you might burn an additional 210 extra calories. But like I said, this can range from as low as 10% to as high as 50%. And there has been research looking at, and the reason why this kind of all came about and why people started digging into this in the research realm is they looked at hunter-gatherers, so people who lived in more rural areas that had to go out and walk and hunt for their food or gather their food, even like go and walk and gather water, carry it in these big buckets, back to the can't think of the word, not camp, village that they might be staying in. But they've realized that, okay, these people are getting 30, maybe 40,000 steps per day. Their energy expenditure should be through the roof. But when they actually look at their energy expenditure and calculate it based on that many steps, they realize they're actually burning a lot less than what you would estimate from these pretty solid equations. So there must be something going on here that's causing them to burn less calories in other areas to make up for that. And these extreme levels of activity are where you notice these high levels of compensation. So a 50% compensation in the amount of exercise you're doing, you'll probably see that more often the higher your energy expenditure gets. So if you're walking 20, 30,000 steps, something crazy per day, you're probably going to see the high end of the compensation a little bit more in those scenarios versus if you're just getting, let's say, 8,000 steps per day, you probably won't notice that high level of compensation at least. But as well as the high levels of activity can cause high levels of compensation, there's another factor that can cause these high levels of compensation as well. And it's not related to activity, but it's related to food intake. And what that is the more extreme diet that you're in, or the lower the amount of calories you're eating while also doing that high level activity, the greater the chances that you're having that higher level of energy compensation along with it. So for example, if you are, trying to get 15,000 steps per day, you're working out, maybe 6 days a week, maybe even 7, you're eating 1,200 calories per day, and that's very low for you and your body, you're more likely to be on that 50%, maybe close to that 50% realm as far as energy compensation. So you're not getting as much of the fat loss that what you would expect from how much you're burning and how little you're eating, because your body is compensating by, like I said, slowing down the rate that your hair grows, slowing down the rate that your nails grow, slowing down overall NEAT, non-exercise kind of subconscious activity. Your body's ramping down its sex hormones. Your body is reducing its libido. It's reducing its overall core body temperature a little bit to make up for those differences. And this is also why hunter gatherers see like these bigger energy compensations too, is because they're experiencing kind of both ends of the spectrum. Probably they're experiencing these super high levels of activity, like I said, walking around doing 30 to 40,000 steps per day, but they also probably are having a pretty low calorie intake for what they need too. So they're kind of experiencing both realms where their energy expenditure, like even though they're getting so much more activity, their energy expenditure might be the same as what the average American is, even though the average American is very sedentary, just because of these adaptations. So these hunter-gatherers, like I said, they are more on the extreme end, but also like ultra marathon runners can experience a lot of this too, or maybe somebody who just runs a lot in general, maybe you're even a marathon runner. You might experience a little bit more of this energy compensation, even if you're eating enough calories. Because of all the extra activity you're doing, your body will start to adjust some of these other variables. And this is why you can't just only rely on exercise for fat loss. Because your body is so smart, and it's so smart when it comes to survival. And that's why we have been able to survive for so many years as humans. But it will take what you either what you give it or take what you force it to do and try to adapt to it as much as possible to protect itself from starvation. And this is why when it comes to fat loss, we don't want to just rely on or exercise to burn calories. And we don't want to think of exercise as a means to necessarily burn calories. We want to think of it as somewhat of a means to, keep our energy expenditure up. But we also want to do or treat it as a way to keep and build lean muscle. That way the weight we do lose when we enter a fat loss phase is actually fat. And if you're not really exactly sure what I'm referring to, I've done plenty of lives regarding lifting, how important it is for fat loss, protein, how important it is for fat loss. But it's basically the more muscle we can keep and maintain as we lose weight, the more fat loss we're going to see. And also the more fat loss is going to be easier to actually maintain going forward long term. So we want to think of our exercise as a way to just get all the health benefits from it, mental health benefits too, physical health benefits. We want to use it as a way to keep our calories burned per day up a little bit. And then we want to use it as a way to make sure we're maintaining our muscle mass as we're losing weight and not losing muscle along the way. So those are kind of the four purposes, but notice we don't want our exercise to be like to make up our whole calorie deficit. We don't want to achieve fat loss entirely just from doing extreme levels of activity, because we're going to have this compensation and we're going to get diminishing returns from it the higher we get with our exercise activity. So we're going to get less out of it with the more additional output we put in. Also, when we are in a fat loss phase, we want to keep our calories at a high enough level to where we don't see this huge energy compensation either. We want to have them low enough to achieve a modest calorie deficit, so we're losing body fat. But we also don't want them to be too low to where we're dealing with these negative adaptations of the rest of our energy expenditure going down. That way you're not shooting yourself in the foot, eating super low calories while also exercising a ton and then losing half the amount of fat that you would predict and, suffering a ton because of it and not reaping the rewards from it. So this is also why when I work with clients, we use very strategic, what are called refeed days, which are planned periods of maybe bringing calories up for a couple of days in a row, maybe even a few days in a row, just to kind of reset the system a little bit, give your body some more energy, give your body some more calories. And that can in turn reduce some of this energy compensation that might be taking place, at least for a few days. Also, there are psychological benefits that go along with, having refeeds, having higher calorie days too. But that is a big physiological benefit of it. And this is also another reason why we implement diet breaks or maintenance periods pretty frequently with our clients. That way, we're able to have more extended periods, maybe 1 to 2 weeks, maybe even longer, of eating higher calories. So we can kind of reduce some of that energy compensation that takes place from exercise as well. So the exercise calories you're burning, you're at least getting the most bang for your buck out of them when you implement these two strategies. Also, something else that might help as well is maybe even cycling activity. So if you are eating pretty high calories, or not eating pretty high calories, doing pretty high amounts of exercise for a given period of time because you're really pushing fat loss, dialing that back a little bit so your body gets a little bit less adapted to the high amounts of exercise can actually be a good strategy to then, you pull back a little bit and then all of a sudden you add in more exercise and then you actually get a little bit more of the calorie burn out of it without as much of the compensation for a short period of time, and then kind of go back and forth too. So that's not necessarily like research proven that work, but it's more of a theory that it could help to kind of combat some of this stuff too. So overall, like I said, trying to achieve a fat loss, like a successful fat loss phase, or trying to achieve a good calorie deficit from just increasing activity, you're kind of climbing an uphill battle the more extreme your activity levels get. If you want to not cut your food at all, not cut your calories at all, and then just do 15, 20,000 steps per day, you're not going to get as much out of it unless you're implementing a strategic calorie deficit with, like I said, these refeed days or these diet breaks sprinkled in there to help reverse some of those negative adaptations too. So I hope this was pretty informative, and I hope this kind of helped you to think of exercise in a different lens. Because a lot of clients come into my program, when I start coaching them, and they think of exercise as a means to burn calories for fat loss. And sometimes they come into the program kind of obsessing over, okay, what does my watch say as far as how many calories I'm burning? Like, oh, I only burned 500 calories during this workout. It was a waste, or I need to do more, or I only burned, 300 calories from this workout. I usually hit 500. I need to go do more. We don't want to think of exercise as a means to burn an exact calorie amount, because there's going to be some level of compensation anyway, regardless, to make that energy or to make that calorie count that we think we burned inaccurate. And also, like I said, you're climbing an uphill battle because the more exercise you do, the more compensation that's going to take place. So think of exercise as a way to improve your health, as a way to burn a little bit extra calories, but more importantly, as a way to keep your muscle mass around. That way you're more likely to actually lose fat when you lose weight, and you're also actually more likely to maintain that fat loss going forward long term. So hope this was informative. Definitely let me know in the comments if it was a little eye-opening, if you've never heard about this model or this theory before. Definitely let me know if any other additional questions or clarifications you have on any of this. Would love to go back and forth. Appreciate you all. And that's it. And I will see you guys in the next one.